advocate again, like if I was a curator and I was mounting a show that is basically intended to adults, for adults,
Yeah.
would I really want to hang some pieces really low just so that children could get a view of them?
People with different physical access, like disabilities, the people who are on the wheelchair, gender could be an element in this, and of course, and mobility, it has a major concern, and the topmost would be the language.
He said it's just so hard to translate it into Marathi. Hello, this is Wazo X Wazo coming to you from Udaipur. Welcome to another session of Evil O. And before we continue, I'm just going to say right away this time, please remember to like and subscribe to this channel. It really helps these videos get around, circulate, and grow. So that's very important. Like and subscribe on YouTube. But to get in today's presentation, I'm with a man who had a very interesting article appear in Midday this past week. It was called Leave the Door Open. And it was about some very important issues in the Indian art scene. And so I would like to introduce Nikhil Purohit. Am I saying that right? Purohit? Nikhil Purohit.
That's right.
Did I get it right? Okay. So Nikhil, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you did? Because your article was based on research, correct?
Right.
So let's talk about that.
Sure. So the research began with the idea of understanding the factors of accessibility. How accessible is the city of Bombay in terms of visual arts? Being a student from JJ School of Art and being in Bombay for more than a decade now, I always face this issue of language. Not personally, but with a lot of my fellow students and eventually fellow artists who always had a difficulty in accessing the programming of City of Bombay. So when we speak about language, then I thought there are so many other factors adding up.
Can I interrupt? Is the programming in the city of Mumbai basically in Marathi or is it in Hindi?
Yeah, the programming is largely in English.
In English? Ah, okay. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So now we geographically, if we look at the visual arts sector of Bombay, Mumbai has a major concentration in South Bombay and then to an extent in the Central Bombay, or what we can call it as the Worli Lower Parel region. So in a way, it's in a centralized kind of operation which happens. Now the location is pretty obvious in many ways since how the city has shaped, but eventually it hasn't contributed to or addressed different in the different suburbs of the city itself. Like Navi Mumbai doesn't have any visual art scene at all, and to an extent there are a couple of organizations like Kona in Borivali and a few in Thana and Mulund region.
Well, I do notice when I'm in Mumbai that the gallery scene seems to be between Lower Parel, Worli, and then going into Colaba, and obviously a lot in Colaba and South Bombay.
That's right.
And yeah, there is that old British English sort of aristocracy that continues on there. And I mean, they're no longer British, but they're Indians who have picked up that culture and that flavor. And I've wondered too many times when I go on, well, how do Marathi speakers relate to it? I knew there was one art critic one time, my old friend Abhijit Tamhane. I don't know if you know him, but he used to write for, I think, the Maharashtrian Times in Marathi. So yes, that was going on, but other than that, it never seemed like there was much.
Right. So the research started factoring the possible elements in it, like age, educational background, people with different physical access, like disabilities, the people who are on the wheelchair, gender could be an element in this, and of course, and mobility, it has a major concern, and the topmost would be the language. And if you notice, all the operations that are happening in these institutions, I wouldn't pinpoint only at one particular set of galleries, private or in that way, because the problem is multi-layered, and it is not concentrated only to a set of organizations who are operating. So it can be even about to do with the art schools, where an awareness about arts programming is not done, or the artists themselves who conduct solo exhibitions or even group exhibitions, and the considerations for, like, for example, height of a person. How easily accessible is it for children? Suppose children are visiting the exhibition, so is there any height consideration for them?
Interesting. Yeah. So your research went far beyond language issues. It went into all sorts of things about accessibility.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I notice oftentimes in galleries, like, I'm a tall person, so I'm comfortable with things at a tall level, but you have shorter people and they're like, you know, looking up, trying to see something. It's very difficult to hit the right height.
True.
People.
So, of course, now language is one of the major entry point to the access, because the moment there is no other language, when you say it could be Hindi or Marathi in city of Bombay, it becomes limiting. Like, okay, am I welcome or not? So that becomes one of the concerns, where you are overwhelmed with the presence, the atmosphere itself, and then should I enter or not? And hence, what I have noticed being an academic, that students always face the problem, like they don't want to get into that. And like, basically they are kind of scared of going there, because they have to face the language fear. Plus then they don't understand and they comprehend anything over there.
Now, when you're talking about them being scared, are you talking about a place like JJ School in Art, they're intimidated to apply, or are you talking about something like the NGMA to just enter and go view an exhibition?
Right. Like, it could be both. Like, even in art schools, when they are kind of getting admitted to the art school, they have, like, most of the students coming in Maharashtra, like in the city, to the city, hail from vernacular background. Students are a major part of the art schools in Mumbai, especially. So them, when they actually go to a museum or an art gallery, so then they don't know what to do, and what is the modality of entering an art gallery, what to comprehend. To annotate that, the understanding of theory in the art schools is minimal, and again, the pedagogy or a redundant pedagogy can contribute to that, or the availability of texts in regional languages, which can bridge this kind of gap. It is very minimal again. Of course, I wouldn't say it is not at all there.
The thing is that, you know, people don't understand how intimidating it can really be. Like, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family where my mother had an interest in art, so she would take me to the local museum and things like that. I had a sense of what, like, a gallery opening would be like, even when I was younger. But I mean, even I had relatives back in the US when I would have an art opening and invite people. And if I invited some of these relatives, they'd be like, well, what are we supposed to do? We just come and we stand? You know, like, they wanted to know, like, the procedure. And it was like, well, there isn't really a procedure at most art openings. You just come look at the art and make chat, you know, but people don't know that. And they get afraid, as you say.
Right. And one major thing I notice is there is always a debate, like, between the lay and the artist. We don't understand modern art. Of course, now the idea of modern has surpassed that decades ago, but still we refer to that word and we don't understand modern art. So the requirement for a mediation, either through the art organizers, in this case curators, gallerists, or even the artists themselves who are designing the exhibitions. Of course, there are exceptions to this, but like, how do you engage a viewer? Like, in most cases, suppose a set of viewers who are coming to Mumbai, like tourists, they visit Jahangir Art Gallery and they just move swiftly throughout the gallery, and they don't even notice like what exactly is being displayed. Same happens in the museum as well. But of course, in museum they have different engagement tools like the kiosks which are there. They have provided a certain set of activities which hold their time in front of each painting, or at least in a certain gallery. So this is something, as part of my research, I interviewed either one-to-one as well as through Google Forms, how and what are the factors they think about while curating an exhibition or designing their own exhibition.
Well, that's why I always gave Abhijit Tamhane a lot of credit for writing his articles in Marathi. And he said it was quite difficult to do, though he's a native Marathi speaker, but he said the art lingo, you know, that we use when discussing modern, postmodern art, he said it's just so hard to translate it into Marathi because there is no vocabulary for it. So he has to use like 5 words for something that you would use just 1 word in English. So that becomes another concern.
Right. And this is a very valid point. Also, the kind of level of comprehension would vary significantly in lack of the literature available, and rather the vocabulary, as you mentioned. So if you don't have that vocabulary in the regional language itself, then accessing the concepts which are in the contemporary art scene becomes very, again, limited. And then you never know, like, what do you exactly mean by conceptual art? Like, students from rural background ask me when I go visit them. So like the fourth year student asks me, like, why do you leave a border for a portrait? Now, this is something of very fundamental in the first year itself. And so here it becomes troublesome. Like, do I answer him as a first year student, or should I give him tools to adapt to this? And that becomes a challenging affair for me.
On some levels, I relate because I know that India was very easy for me as an English speaker because I came in here from outside. I didn't know anything about the Indian art scene, Indian modernism, whatever, but it was very easy to access because you could simply pick up books and magazines, Art India, you know, Take, Lalika Journal, whatever, and you could read. And so just through reading very quickly, I could educate myself. But, you know, I also go to Thailand frequently, and the Thai art scene is an impenetrable wall to me because all of the literature is in Thai. There's like 2 books on Thai art in English currently. Everything else is Thai. They have art journals, art magazines. It's all in Thai. So when I go to Thailand, I understand how these kids who, you know, only speak Kannada or something and how they're struggling here because there's just this wall of English in front of them.
Right.
You know, I get it.
Yes.
Yeah. But how do you break that down? I don't know.
Right. Especially like the idea of art mediation can be really helpful in that case. Like spending more time in the gallery and trying to interpret by themselves, besides giving them the ready-made wall text kind of tools, this can enable them. And while I was part of a workshop at Kochi Biennale in 2016, so we developed a set of tools of 10 activities, which is easily usable by anybody who can and it is open source. It is available on the website, and one can easily refer to them and use them tools and engage audience to a great extent. And I have used those tools in a couple of exhibitions at NGMA. Of course, one more thing which comes to in terms of accessibility is about what about the people with disabilities, right?
Yes.
In terms of sight, in terms of mobility, as well as when people, like, of course, the autism or people with not so well developed brains, so they have a major challenge. Like, can we really comprehend visual arts in that case, or they even can see or experience it? Now, I wouldn't say that the city of Bombay does not offer any solutions at all, but then the proportion which one can offer is way lesser than one can actually look forward to. So
I don't know. I'm just asking, are there wheelchair access ramps at like the NGMA and the
yeah,
different museums in
as per
Mumbai?
as per my research, only 51% of the institutions provide this facility.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, like as a counterpart to this, the buildings, the old buildings they are located in, they don't allow for provision of lifts or ramps accordingly. So then that
Right.
becomes what is a practical problem even for the galleries. Right. The museums certainly have this facility, and they like ramps as well as lift facilities. There is a combination of things, and it becomes easily available. CSMVS does a lot of tactile activities also. So wherein people from blind schools or basically yeah, with the people without sight can actually come in and feel those exhibits. And yeah, one of the commendable activity of museum I can mention is of the city on wheels, the museum on wheels, wherein the bus goes to a certain area in the city, and also it is touring Maharashtra now. Not of course not in the COVID situation, but before that the museum on wheels project used to go to Thane and other suburbs of Mumbai and conduct events or activities and workshops for the people, either in a school or a certain defined premises. So the engagement becomes higher in that case.
Yeah, it reminds me of the library on wheels that many countries and cities have. Bring the books to the children rather than make the children go to the library. And it's a way to sort of rope them in, get them interested even in a picture book,
Right.
simple reading book. And then, if you have the right person to encourage them and engage them, then pretty soon they get enough interest that they will seek out the library themselves. And that's the whole idea, I would assume, with a museum on wheels, to encourage people to the point eventually they will actually hop on the bus and go to the museum themselves. But then what greets them once they get at the museum? Then does it still become an intimidating place to enter? Or do you think that once they've been initiated a little bit through the museum on wheels, they're more confident to then enter the museum space?
Yes, it certainly invites them even more because the objects which are taken on this bus are replicas, and for obvious protect reasons, and like it has to be protected and it cannot be so easily taken the original pieces. That certainly invites them to the museum itself. Uh, but again, in that case, to what extent the parents' initiative is also equally important. Like on the contrary, what the art community does for the people, as well as like on the contrary, are people also engaging or taking an initiative to engage with the arts is equally important. So we cannot put the entire onus on the arts community itself to cater to the entire city of Bombay. So that vice versa, how that can be fed into each other is something crucial one has to look.
Right. I mean, a lot of galleries will tell you that they just struggle to survive. They struggle to sell enough to even keep their doors open to the average person, whatever the average person is. So to take into consideration all these other things is just beyond them, you
Right.
know. But then in some ways, I think it's more the institutions that should be doing this, because part of the institution's job by its nature, the institution is not trying to make sales. The institution is trying to bring awareness of
Right.
art and the history of art and whatever. So it is very much within the purview of the institution to get out there into the community and bring people in, because that's what it's formed for, is to interest people in art and make them aware of art and make them understand that's part of their shared culture. Um,
Right.
but how do you put the pressure on the institutions to do that?
Well,
That's the thing.
yeah, like again, always there is a concern of funding in that case, like how to operate and what to operate has been always a challenge for the non-profit organizations who are mainly doing this kind of activities in the city. But besides that, galleries can certainly put out their invites or the kind of texts, which a small text, which are not more than 300, 500 words, can certainly be translated and put out in the public. And that itself can be a point of engagement, and a very easy engagement, rather than going like whatever limitations, or rather catering to their interests and, as of course, business needs. So this something one can certainly do, and conducting more bilingual or talk sessions or panel discussions in regional languages is something of a crucial nature, I think, in this case.
One thing I've never understood is why there are not more magazines, art magazines in Desi languages. Why does that not occur? Or do they exist and I'm simply not aware of them? I mean, I do know there's some sort of Bengali arts journal that comes out in Bengali. How many others are there that are similar, that come out in local languages? Am I the one who's unaware, or do they not exist?
Yeah, the nature they exist is not dedicated visual arts magazines as they come. In recent times, there has been development, like Hakara is doing bilingual posts. Basically, they run an online magazine, e-magazine kind of thing. So that is accessible in both English and Marathi. But on the other hand, there are in Maharashtra there is a tradition of Diwali Anka. So during the Diwali, so they publish a kind of a catalog or a magazine which has a lot of articles and across the subjects. So then visual arts becomes a part of it. And
that's
also
good.
yeah, so then there are very fewer, like rare occasions where you find a dedicated visual arts magazine in Marathi. Yeah, so yeah, the presence is like, it is integral part of the other publications which happen.
I always remember, I'm very fond of the artist Jagadish Tamaniani. And when I first met him in Baroda, because I think he's extremely talented, and when I first met him in Baroda, different people were saying, oh, you have to meet Jagadish, you have to meet Jagadish. But the story was that because he came from Vishnakapatnam, he only spoke Telugu, I think it is, right? From Vishnakapatnam. And so he had a very hard time, because in Baroda, all the classes are taught in either English or Gujarati, English and Gujarati. And he was having a very hard time fitting in the classes and also among the fellow students. But as a result of that, he spent all of his time in his rental space just working and making this phenomenal work. So he used the time to make so he ended up speaking, through his visuals rather than through the verbals, and that's one reason how he developed his visual power. So sometimes there's ways to get around that. I mean, that's the nature of art, but it also puts a tremendous burden on some students.
Right. Right. So yeah, like especially when I was in the academics, and in most cases, like even when I was teaching in JJ, at times the students felt that my Marathi, which I come from Pune, and it's supposed to be a fairly like my language is treated to be better in average. So students found even that to be difficult, and that becomes challenging. Like if I really want to translate something, can I be able to translate the crux of the content, especially in case of aesthetics? Will it be even possible? And especially making it dilute. Should I dilute it, or should I make it easy? Like how do you deal with conceptual topics? Like if you're going to talk about Kant and Hegel, how are you going to make it easy for students? So that becomes pretty challenging while you're handling, and that too in an hour-long class, or into the maximum a couple of hours. So yes, that's another part, like where even if you make it accessible, but then to what extent do you have to bring it down?
All right. There's sometimes I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit with some of this, because it's all very nice to try to reach everybody. but there's a couple things that go on. I remember one time I was in Venice in Italy. And you know, Venice has all of these little canals, and there's little bridges that go over all the canals. And there was an American couple there, and they got on some local Italian's case at the restaurant and saying, well, this place just isn't at all accessible to people with handicaps. It's not handicap accessible. And it's like, yeah, but I don't know if it can be, because it's sort of like you have all of these bridges. You'd have to put wheelchair ramps on every bridge. And in doing so, you would ruin much of the beauty of the place. You know, you start tampering with the aesthetics of it. So sometimes there's real physical and philosophical questions that have to be raised. It's not a simple answer. And then the other thing is, reaching out to students who don't speak English or Hindi, let's say, is a good thing. But then also they need to be aware that if they're going to go out into the wider art world, you know, which encompasses Australia and the UK and the US and, you know, the English-speaking countries, or even getting into Delhi and Mumbai, eventually they are going to have to learn some English. Just like if I went to Thailand, eventually I'd probably have to learn some Thai in order to really fit in. Unlike India, where I feel pretty comfortable getting by with English. But
yeah, besides the language element here, like as you, in continuation to what you said, like how many blind people can actually be catered to? Like, what will be the nature of translating that element? You can make tactile objects, but to what extent can you translate an art object into a tactile object?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and of course, in that case, probably you might end up translating it in a different way than it would ever be. And obviously, like, arts are always either to an extent completely distorted in interpretation. So they always face this threat of distortion.
I've questioned that too, because I have been to museums where they translate a visual canvas, say, into a tactile something for people to feel. Now, in ways that might be helpful, if you're looking at something and you can feel the figures and you can feel the mountains and feel the sunset or something, I can see that being helpful. I don't know. But sometimes it seems like it'd make more sense to guide those people, like to maybe sculpture exhibitions or something that are meant to be tactile, that you can actually feel and appreciate the shape of a sculpture. So I wonder if some of that's a bit misguided, but I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that point. Yes.
Yeah. So with what has been the reaction to your article? Have you gotten good feedback?
Yes, feedback from the people who kind of are compassionate regarding this have responded very well, because I myself come from a vernacular background. I originally from Karnataka, and like when I came to Maharashtra, I learned Marathi. So that phase has been very difficult for me, like assimilating a new language altogether. But at the same time, it has been very enjoying for me. And that itself made like, okay, now when I was studying at JJ School of Art, and my hostel mates always had this problem of access to language. So then this transition, how do you look at it? So it always troubled me, like, what can I do for it? Can there be a format where it can be mutually beneficial in many ways to approach this idea? Yeah, this reminds me of a wonderful project by Sudhir Patwardhan, Dr. Sudhir Patwardhan, who initiated almost a decade ago. He he went on a tour of cities of Maharashtra, where it was titled as Expanding Horizons. So he curated a set of like, it was a curated exhibition, and it was a moving, like a traveling exhibition to different cities. And he made it a point that there are a lot of discussions happening in regional language as integral part of the exhibition itself. And I think it's a very benchmark initiative where it became like it went to Nasik, it went to Aurangabad, it went to Pune. So it covered major centers of Maharashtra and made a sort of data available about what modern or what contemporary art is about.
Yeah, that's a good project to do.
Right.
For sure. So is there anything else you'd like to say? I don't want this one to get too long. We're already up to a half hour, I think. This could probably go on quite a long time. My last talk with Lena went on for an hour and a half. I don't want it to get quite that long. But I mean, if you had to choose between all of these different issues, where would the most important places be to begin?
Academics, right from schooling, and like integrating the kind of things what we are discussing right now.
Okay, but I mean, would you begin with language first?
Yes.
Would language be the most important?
I will begin with the language. Perhaps I have already started with it. Through my Instagram channel, I have been, since lockdown period, I have started doing discussions in Marathi. And like I try to do that to a major extent because it depends also on the speakers who come on and their ease of language. But most of it has been in Marathi, so that students from different places, and not just students, but anybody who would be interested in that kind of discussion. It might sound very basic, it might sound very fundamental, but yeah, so that's something I've started. And
language seems like the easiest place to start to me.
Right.
You know, it's like sometimes it's just as simple as putting in that second or third label under an artwork that is in more than just English or more than just Hindi.
Right.
So that's a simple one to start at, and it's more of a will to do it, just to have the will to do it.
Okay.
You know, I think it becomes complicated when you start talking about the disabled and hanging things at various heights for children and whatever. That all becomes a very difficult thing. Playing devil's advocate again, like if I was a curator and I was mounting a show that is basically intended to adults, for adults,
yeah,
would I really want to hang some pieces really low just so that children could get a view of them? And then it becomes very uncomfortable for the adults to view them, because the adults basically have to like bend way down to the floor to see. So some of the things I have more difficult solutions than others, I guess.
Right. Yeah, as you rightly put it, like my research exactly brings all these factors together, because there is no one solution to all these problems. And again, as I said earlier, the onus is not only on one set of institutions, galleries, or individuals. So it is kind of an integrated thing, and different problems have different solutions in different capacities. So one has to identify and, based upon their interest, address them.
And, you know, you're always up against a power structure who having some of these things, such as the English ability, is to their advantage. And as long as they have that, they're not going to be too willing to give that up either.
Very much.
So then you have to contend with that also.
True.
Anyway, Purohit, I'm going to make it short. I don't want this week's to get too long. And I'm stumbling all over my words tonight. I don't know why. I must be tired or something. Normally I'm pretty good speaking, and my English is not so good tonight. Anyway, nice talking to you. So I'm going to say goodbye from Evil O. Purohit, say goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone. Bye, Purohit. Bye.